showed up on Arizona basketball's radar. Who is he? What can he provide? And could he be a game changer? All of that. Let's get started here on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for listening to Locked On Wildcats, your show, your everyday, and making it your first listen. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, we've been talking basically nonstop about transfer portal candidates. Who could Arizona get? Who was another option out there? All of that good stuff. Now, and we'll talk about some of more of the names. We're going to talk about Keshad Johnson. We'll talk about Arthur Kaluma, guys like that. But one guy that definitely has entered the radar, has entered the equation, would be D'Marco Dunn. Now, a lot of people might not know exactly who D'Marco Dunn is. That's fine. That's why we're here. All right, D'Marco Dunn, originally a Tucson kid, started at Marana for a couple years. I've seen him quite a few times when he was in high school. Granted, I haven't watched him much at North Carolina, but he then transfers to North Carolina for his upperclassmen years and ends up playing at ends up playing at the University of North Carolina. Now, with Dunn, it's fascinating because he went there and he didn't play a ton his first 2 years, but that's also because there was some pretty talented players in front of him. Also, I've always had real doubts about what kind of coach Hubert Davis is. Again, I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but I'm also not saying he's a good coach. And that's kind of where that is right there with Hubert Davis. But with D'Marco Dunn, it's interesting, though, because he's also he's a player that, let's just talk about what he can do for you right now. And again, wouldn't be a starter, probably would never be a starter here, but I could see him being a key rotation piece. First of all, he's every bit of 6'3", 6'3", 6'4", something like that. He's a pretty tough kid. And if you've watched Arizona hoops over the last couple of years, you know that one thing that this team has lacked to a certain extent is toughness. He provides you toughness. And you got some other things in play there as well. The first one would be, though, his ability to be able to play defense. Last year, we had a bunch of guys who on this team were just not really defensive players. We're not defensively oriented. And, while Kirk Kriisa liked to talk a lot, the one thing about Kirk Kriisa that I think everybody probably knows by this point is that he was not the toughest guy in the world. Talking a lot does not make you tough. And he wasn't a very good defender. Teams went at him, and deservedly so. So you need some tougher guys in there. Now, you bring in Kylan Boswell already. You know that Kylan Boswell is a pretty tough dude. We watched him last year. We know what he can provide out there. And not only is he a pretty tough dude, he's also a guy that is going to be able to make some threes, is going to be able to do and is going to be able to do a number of different things right there. And that's where I think it kind of is with Kylan Boswell. You provide some toughness right there, and that's going to be a key to. That's going to be a theme to this show right here: the toughness factor. Okay. So again, Kylan Boswell, tough. Jaden Bradley, who we brought in from the University of Alabama, tough. Jaden Bradley has seen a lot. But not on top of that, he's also a top 30 type player right there. Which is something that you really, really like. Now, one thing about it is that with the University of Arizona, you want to be able to get a lot more of those kind of guys. One thing I got to give Sean Miller is he generally had tough players around here. He generally had guys that fit into that system. And with Sean Miller, that's kind of where, but he also didn't have some of the stuff that Tommy Lloyd had. So you got Kylan Boswell. We know he's tough. He's stocky. He's physical. He can make threes and get in the lane. He can do all that stuff. Jaden Bradley, much of the same. Now, again, not quite the not quite the maybe the player that Kylan Boswell is right now, but a player who is also very, very good though. And he fits in with what Arizona wants to do. And on top of that, he gives you a little bit more position flexibility there and a little bit of security. And security in that Arizona has a 2024 class coming in that figures to be a monster class with Carter Bryant, with Jamari Phillips, probably going to add some other guys in there as well. It is a nice, deep class that you're probably going to have in there, and it'll probably be a top 5 class in the country. Now, what happens if Kylan Boswell were to leave? You want depth there already, and you want guys who are ready to perform at that level, who are prepared to perform at that level. And I think that's where Kylan Boswell Jaden Bradley does help. Now, D'Marco Dunn. Where would D'Marco Dunn fit in here? Now, again, we just talked about it. He's a tough dude. He's done some really, really good things in his college career for sure. In his college career and in his high school career. What he's got to be able to do, though, is you'd love to see him be able to shoot the ball a little bit more. I actually would not be opposed to redshirting him, kind of taking that Kadeem Allen route to a certain extent. Now, again, players really don't do that in this day and age, but I do believe that Dunn would have a role. And I think it would immediately be 8 to 10 minutes per game, something like that, maybe more. Now, with Philly B, give you an example here and why I would bring him in. I hope that our guy Philly B, proves me wrong. It wouldn't be the first time, and it would not be the last time that I would be proven wrong by a player. But I also don't believe that Philly B is a guy that should be getting rotation minutes next year. That's where I believe that D'Marco Dunn would be infinitely better right there, because D'Marco Dunn is, in my opinion, just kind of a better player across the board. Again, I would love to be wrong. I've been wrong on players before, so write off Philly B at your own peril, not because of what I am saying right there. Now, with Dunn, though, you're automatically tougher because, again, now we've just talked about it. You've got Kylan Boswell. You would have Jaden Bradley. You'd have Pella Larson. That's probably going to be your starting 3 right there. And then if D'Marco Dunn is kind of that fourth guy, that fourth guard, fourth perimeter / player, you're okay with that because that also means that those guys are good and that he panned out. Now, when you watch D'Marco Dunn, you'll say, man, that's a big, strong, physical kid right there. How did he get so big, strong, and physical? I am going to say that it was probably Built Bar. Now, listen, when you're D'Marco Dunn, when you're a player of that ilk, you are going to play hard. I mean, you're going to be physical. You're going to play hard. But you also need something to help you recover at the end of the day. That's where Built Bar comes in. Built Bar says, you know what? Let's cut out the middleman right here. Let's go straight to the source. So when you're leaving the gym, you don't have to say, man, I don't want to be doing this workout, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. Because not only did I just work my butt off in the gym, now I've got to go eat something that I don't want to eat, that isn't good, all of that stuff. You don't want that anymore. Built Bar is here. Built Bar, you go into GNC and you can get good. You can get it. It tastes good and it's good stuff. So again, check it out, Built Bar. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with you. Thanks for keeping it locked on, Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, what I do like, though, about Tommy Lloyd reaching out to these players, though, is it also shows me that he's getting it a little bit. Now, again, getting it a little bit, keep in mind he's the winningest coach in college basketball history the last 2 years, or his first 2 years. So Tommy Lloyd obviously gets it. I'm a guy with a podcast here. So, again, take that for what it's worth. But Lloyd, there's a couple things though that I was worried about. I did not want to hold on to Kirk Kriisa. In my opinion, Kirk Kriisa, it does more again, he wins. He won. He was point guard, get all that. But also, never watched Kirk Kriisa and said that he's a player that will get you to the next level. Kerr's just kind of there. Kerr's just kind of Kerr. He's not a very good shooter, even though he's hyped as a shooter. He can't really, not a very good ball handler, and defensively, he's very meh. And I don't think that you can win games like that. Kylan Boswell can shoot the three, can play defense, and has an ability to, I think, to get much better than what Kirk Kriisa is. And that's why I think that's a huge upgrade. Then Jaden Bradley. I liked Courtney Ramey this past year. I thought he was the best player in the backcourt by a good percentage. I wish that Ramey had done a little bit more, honestly, as far as using his ball handling to get to the hoop, to be able to break people down. But that really wasn't his thing. That's fine. But what he was able to do, though, is he was able to make he was able to make a lot of long shots, and he was also able to be a pretty timely player as well. He had some very timely buckets this past year. Arizona needs something like that. Hopefully Jaden Bradley, I think from a statistical perspective, I think Jaden Bradley can come right in and do what he did, to be honest with you. I think that Jaden Bradley can get you 11 points, 3-4 assists, 3-4 rebounds, something like that. I don't think that that's too much to ask at all. And to be able to provide some really good defense there as well. So that, to me, those are two guys right there that are going to play 30 minutes per game. And like we talked about as well, Jaden Bradley is also giving you a little bit of position flexibility right there, because not only that, Jaden Bradley will also be able to get to the basket and be able to provide some defense that maybe he didn't have last year. Now, again, not the shooter Ramey is, but he's also a young kid. That's why it might take him a little bit of time, but I do believe that he's going to be able to get there. Now, then at that small forward spot, you need Pelle Larsson to be able to take that jump. You need Pelle Larsson to be able to make that leap. I personally don't think that's going to happen. And keep in mind, I was wrong on Pelle. My bad, Pelle. That has become a movement here in Tucson. My bad, Pelle. So with when it comes to Arizona, with Pelle Larsson, the one thing that I do think that you have to look at and you have to say to yourself is, can he make that next level as a ball handler? And I don't know that that is something that he's going to be able to do, but maybe he will be able to do it. I don't know. But generally, when a dude's 22, he is what he is as a ball handler. And you know what? But he can do some really good things. Pelle can be a good standstill shooter. He can be able to play defense, and he can finish at the hoop. Both of those things are things that he can do, and he can do pretty well. Then at that other spot right there, you got some minutes. Because again, all three of those guys are going to play 30 minutes per game, and they all have qualities and they all have some limitations to them. Although I don't know that Boswell has those limitations to him. But one thing about this is that with Arizona, as we keep talking about, you got to be able to have that other guy, because again, there's going to be 20, 30 minutes to be had there. And with all due respect, I could be totally wrong on this one. I don't see Philly B as being a contributor at the University of Arizona. Again, would love to be wrong there. That's why, and I think that a guy like a KJ Lewis coming in, and if you were to add in a D'Marco Dunn, both those guys with Tucson links, by the way, those guys are fascinating because to me, they have higher upsides. They're pretty athletic. They can guard. And I think that there's a lot of untapped potential in play for both of those dudes. So those are the guys that I'd like to see there on the perimeter. Maybe if you were to get D'Marco Dunn, again, maybe you add another player as well. But the one thing across the board, though, that we're just going to keep harping on, that is a tougher team right there. And again, that's what Arizona needs. Arizona needs toughness. And not only does Arizona need toughness, Arizona needs toughness, and Arizona needs a ability to be able to get into the paint and be able to finish. And so far, Arizona's shown that they've got some of those guys. It'll be interesting to see what exactly happens right here. Now, I think it's going to be fascinating, though, to see what happens here because, again, Tommy Lloyd has obviously shown that he does believe that he needs to get tougher there, and so far he's going to do it. Now, let's talk a little bit about up front in that toughness right here and what exactly that would mean. We're going to talk about who those guys could be on the other side. Thanks for keeping it locked on, Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Now, let's talk a little bit about that toughness factor that we were just talking about. Now, first thing is, with toughness, up front then, Azuolas Tubelis was a very, very good basketball player. But the thing about Azuolas Tubelis, again, though, is that when the big moments came, he wasn't necessarily the dude that really embraced that moment. And when I think the one thing about him is that was always just going to kind of be the way he was. And again, Zoo is a very, very good player here, just not the toughest dude in the world. And you know what? That's okay. So the one thing about it is with Zoo, how do you replace him? Because again, he was still 20-10 essentially. Now the first guy up front, Oumar Ballo. I do wonder if Oumar Ballo is a little bit maxed. He was kind of 15-8 this past year. Again, don't want to dismiss 15-8 because that was very, very good. But also at that 15-8 perspective, he was also, we can just call a spade here. He was there were times too when he struggled against length, when he struggled against when he struggled to be able to get the ball up in the basket. And I don't know that that's necessarily going to change. But the one thing about him, though, that I will say is he improved a lot this past year. It'll be interesting to see if he can make that jump again. Now, if he makes that jump again, then you're looking at an All-American. I don't see him making that jump, but either way, Oumar Ballo's tough, and Oumar Ballo also is a player that wanted to be out there, that wanted to play no matter what. That's one thing that you got to keep in mind about Oumar Ballo, and that's why he is the leader of men that he is right there. Leader of men, Oumar Ballo. Now, at that power forward spot, it's going to be fascinating right there because you're trying to add a Keshad Johnson. Again, tough. A guy, again, averaged 7 and 6 at San Diego State. I think that's probably 11 and 9 at Arizona, something like that. And 11 and 9 at Arizona, I think, is an easy thing to extrapolate when you look at what San Diego State has done over the years and how they play as opposed to Tommy Lloyd. Not dismissing San Diego State in the least. They just played in the national championship game. But, Tommy Lloyd obviously runs a little bit more of a up-tempo, fan-friendly type offense that gets the hustle point players like that a little bit more run, a little bit more shine. Now, the another dude that we need to look at is Henry Vasar. I don't think that Henry's a weenie by any means. I think Henry was just a little overwhelmed this past year. But when I watch him, I see a little bit of fire in him. I see a little bit of a combative streak right there. And we like seeing that out of Henry Vasar. Henry to me will be if he can be, Henry can be 9-4, 9-5 this year. That means a couple things: that he took that jump, or that he was starting and he took that jump. Either way, this is going to be a big offseason for Henry. I think we're going to know what Henry is by this time next year. Well, I think we'll know within the first 5-6 games what he is at this point next year. So that's that. And then Dylan Anderson. Say what you want about Dylan Anderson, but Dylan Anderson's tough. I've seen it. Dylan Anderson has no qualms about getting in there and getting physical with other players. Dylan Anderson, again, another leader out there, and I look for him to be able to be tough as well. Now, some of the other players, though, to keep an eye on: Arthur Kaluma. Kaluma's got talent. I don't know that I would necessarily call him tough, but he's also not a weenie, though, either. Those are the kind of guys, though, and that's why Tommy Lloyd, in my opinion, is saying to himself, I can get tougher out here. I can get players out here. I can get guys that you can make a difference. I need to be able, though, to get players who really buy into what I want to do, though. And I think when he gets that, he's going to have that perfect combination, because offensively, I mean, we've watched this guy. They're never going to struggle to score points. And they're never going to struggle to score points because of the kind of style that Tommy Lloyd runs. And again, that works. That is a great thing right there for the University of Arizona. So again, you got to get a little bit tougher, though, because we've seen it now in the NCAA tournament in its 2 straight years. Arizona's played 3 or 4 games, and they've looked like poo in about 7 or 8 of those halves under Lloyd. And a big part of that is just because they got punked. Against TCU, Arizona should have lost that game. I mean, we can just call it the way it was. Arizona got punked out there. And then Houston, that game felt like it was over before it started. Same thing happened there. And against Princeton, I wouldn't say they got punked, but the moment was definitely too big for a lot of guys. And again, when Julius Tabella is kind of a prime example right there. Zoo's a very good player, But when that game was close, Zoo didn't want the ball. Zoo was not confident in himself. Zoo hesitated, and that's always, that's just kind of the way it is with Zoo right there. So again, I love what Lloyd's doing. The thing that I like about Lloyd too is that he's not square peg, round hole guy where it's I've got to we got to do this, and this in symmetrical order. Tommy Lloyd has certainly shown that he has no problem learning and learning from his mistakes, learning as a new coach should. It's not a sign of weakness to change things. It's a sign of the intelligence to be able to change things up right there. And that's what Tommy Lloyd has done. And that's what we got to give Tommy Lloyd a lot of kudos for doing right there. Okay. So again, that's kind of where it's at right there. Speaking of toughness, tomorrow we're going to talk about Arizona beefing up on the offensive line and the defensive line. Arizona just got a nice football commitment from Toby Mealer out of Chandler Hamilton High School. Big kid, already 6'5", 340, is a 16-year-old, carries it well. I would imagine he's going to end up being a higher rated prospect than these other dudes than some of these other guys. And I think that he's probably going to be a 4-star player when it's all said and done. And I think that the powers that be know that he should be a 4-star player as well. All right. Now, everybody out there, you have a great rest of your Monday. I will be back with you tomorrow. As always, we're coming at you day by day. Thanks for making Locked On your first listen of the day. I'm Mike Luke. We'll be back.